While the Digimon TCG has only been around for a handful of years, each new set release has created vastly different formats, which have brought new and exciting decks to the scene, while also in many cases revitalizing older strategies. As is true with all card games, cases can exist where cards with a ton of potential can release with little or no value or playability, only to have their utility suddenly skyrocket with the release of new cards, strategies, or simply experimentation. Today, we'll be looking at my picks for the top 10 cards in the Digimon TCG that have aged like fine wine, able to grow into their value in one way or another despite being overlooked or underused upon their initial introduction. Kicking off the list at number 10, we have Metal Cedron from BT2. Metal Cedron is an 11 to play, 10,000 DP Mega level Digimon. It digivolves for 3, but has an on-play effect to return up to 2 of your opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon to the hand, and can't be blocked by opposing Digimon with no Digivolution cards. Despite being released in BT2 in Japan, Metal Cedron was a part of the initial release of BT1 in the US, and released alongside it were other cards that comprised the most iconic villains in the full history of the Digimon franchise, the Dark Masters. This original cycle was designed to mimic the existence of these antagonists by encouraging you to play them directly from the hand rather than evolving them onto existing stacks, rewarding you with extremely impactful abilities for the time. While Piedmon would go on to see some experimentation in early purple lists, being a reasonable value engine that could play out additional bodies, a very powerful ability in the early days of the game, the most powerful card in the cycle was undeniably Puppetmon, which was generic enough it could be splashed in an insanely wide range of decks as a potential finisher. Eventually, a unique archetype would emerge, collectively known as Megazoo. The goal was to hard-play, high-impact, on-play Mega-level Digimon and hope the opponent couldn't out so many massive bodies. Both Machinedramon and Puppetmon would feature prominently in these strategies, but who was left on the bench? That's right, our dear friend Metal Cedron. While some Megazoo lists opted for a tech copy or two, by and large he was passed over for the much more powerful Volcanic Dramon, for the same purpose of controlling a wide board of small bodies. Even in the first few formats of the game, Metal Cedron simply wasn't impactful enough. But his luck would change years down the line with the release of EX3, which brought with it a cycle of cards culminating in a new level 7 Digimon, Aegis-Dramon. The strategy revolved around playing aquatic-themed Digimon out from your sources for free, and it just so happens that Metal Cedron fit the strategy like a glove. Thanks to its new partner in crime, Plesiommon, you could add Metal Cedron to the sources of your stack, cheat him into play with Aegis-Dramon, then not only return an opposing Mega to the bottom of the deck thanks to Plesio's Inheritable, but bounce 2 smaller bodies as well, resulting in a massive swing in board presence. As it turns out, bouncing 2 bodies is a lot more worthwhile when it costs a total of 0 additional memory. Unfortunately, Aegis-Dramon hasn't really been able to find a place in the meta yet, preventing Metal Cedron from earning a higher spot on this list. But it's still nice knowing the little brother of the original Dark Master cards was able to finally find a home well past the prime of his 3 siblings. Next up at number 9, we have Promo Black War Greymon. Black War is 11 to play, 3 to digivolve, and has 11,000 DP. His only effect is Digiburst 2, which detaches 2 of his sources to unsuspend himself. Digiburst is a unique mechanic introduced in BT4, and received trickling support up through BT7. The gimmick of detaching sources in order to activate various powerful abilities created quite a few unique strategies for the time, a few of which did find themselves as meta contenders. Black War Greymon's Digiburst was simple, but among the most powerful ever released. Unfortunately, he released during a time when black as a color was still very much floundering to find a good identity for itself, being comprised of a mishmash of half-baked archetypes that didn't really function together cohesively. For reference, in BT4, the only 2 black Digiburst cards were Baboongamon and Gogmamon, both of which were laughably low power by comparison to the other colors. Black War Greymon released in a promo pack alongside 2 other Digiburst Megas, Grand Kuwagamon and Metal Gurruman, neither of which saw any massive meta impact on release. While some experimentation with Gogmamon Black War Beatdown existed, to call it a meta contender would be a bold-faced lie. As the sets passed and Black War Greymon began to get support of its own as a strategy, Promo Black War would go on to see little bits of experimentation here and there, but still struggled to find a good home for itself over other alternatives. In BT9, a new mechanic introduced into the game had potential to massively boost the viability of Digiburst strategies, X-Digivolution. The mechanic basically let you double the number of sources a stack could have, by digivolving same-level Digimon on top of each other. While the vast majority of Digiburst cards had become a distant memory, the biggest winner of this mechanic was definitely Grand Kuwagamon, being the only Digiburst Mega to receive archetypal support within the proper color. The problem was that even now, the Greymon X support line was exclusively red, preventing Promo Black War from being able to reap the benefits of the new mechanic. A few sets later, and the new Black War Greymon X support line finally helped to bridge the gap and gave Black War a way to digivolve onto an X antibody-infused stack. At the time, however, the insane power level of the deck itself was simply too unforgiving for the promo to find itself a proper place in many deck lists. Once BT11 Greymon X received a hit to one copy, and the deck began to readjust, Promo Black War finally began to start rearing its head in various iterations of the growing toolbox of usable Greymon cards. Finally having a proper bridge between itself and the original structure deck Greymon, granting an extra security check, meant Promo Black War was a legitimate OTK tool. Things only got better with the release of Structure Deck 15, bringing a solid black Metal Greymon and another extra check inheritable. While War Greymon isn't currently sitting atop any major meta tier lists, it will always exist as a strong, robust rogue option at the bare minimum. And thanks to the excellent new quality of life options available, the opportunity has finally come for Promo Black War to flex his claws as one of the last surviving viable Digiburst cards. Up next at number 8, we have Kari Kamiya from BT4. Kari is 3 to play and has a single ability. Anytime a card is removed from your security stack, you can suspend this tamer to gain a memory. During the set she was released, Kari faced similar issues to Promo Black War, in the sense that her color hadn't really been able to find any solid footing yet. Purple as a color was also still a hosh-posh of different strategies, with none of them really being able to come together and establish themselves as a proper contender. It didn't help that at the time, Kari's unique condition for memory gain was more than a little unusual. She basically served as a small amount of memory choking on the opponent's turn when they swung into security, but without a cohesive strategy to take advantage of it, she didn't really have much use. Then came the emergence of what has become the most notorious deck in Digimon's history, Security Control, or SecCon for short. Now initially, Kari still wasn't really seeing play in these strategies. The history of SecCon is actually pretty interesting, and has seen a couple of identity rebrandings over the various formats. Initially, the deck was largely yellow and red, featuring large swaths of recovery and removal to create a brutal control strategy, packed with security bombs to keep the opponent at bay. Once BT8 rolled around, the deck began to shift more towards purple and yellow, encouraged by the release of a new structure deck featuring Mastemon, bringing with it one of the most powerful removal options ever printed, Chaos Degradation. Also released within BT8 would be the new defining card of the archetype, Flame Hell Scythe, which would run double duty by not only removing small bodies from the board, but reviving BT1 Magna Angemon for additional recovery. But the final piece of the puzzle, and the card that would help solidify BT4 Kari as a member of the archetype, was her partner in crime, another Kari. BT8 Kari served as BT4 Kari's yellow opposite, and the two worked frighteningly well together. The new Kari was a memory setter, and would even gain you additional memory anytime you recover, which combined with the already existing BT4 Kari would create a much more oppressive resource drain, stealing back turns if your opponent hit the right security threats. While SecCon still exists in a number of distinct forms, and certainly not all of them utilize this memory-stealing duo, the frustration of losing both your stack and your turn has soured many a mood for pilots running decks that can't properly protect against the diverse removal suits of one of the game's most powerful control strategies. Moving on to number 7, we have Howling Crusher from BT1. This option card costs 7 memory and has a single very basic effect: trash all Digivolution cards from under all of your opponent's Digimon. When first released, this card was there really isn't a polite way to put it, it was laughably bad. Like, the fact that this card would ever be called a late bloomer was beyond humorous. 7 mana is already extremely expensive for an option card. For reference, also released in BT1 in the States was Trump Sword, a purple card that would straight up destroy a Digimon as long as it was unsuspended. Howling Crusher under no circumstances would actually remove anything from the field, meaning that after passing the opponent an insane 7 memory, you were still getting hit the following turn. Making the situation worse, during the first few sets of the game, while there were a sparse few valuable inheritables that decks could utilize, by and large, the name of the game was just cheap and efficient Digivolution lines. During these formats, the premium cards of the time were those with minimal Digivolution costs or play costs, to make powering into high impact megas and level 7s as easy as possible. So losing the sources underneath really didn't mean anything. It would take an absolute miracle to make this drink coaster of a card actually usable. And as it turns out, a miracle was in fact on its way. Released in BT6 was one of the most unique cards the game had ever seen, a secret rare called Beelstarmon. She was 12 to play, had 11,000 DP, and would become 1 memory cheaper to play out for every 7 cost option card or card with a 3 Musketeers trait in your trash. On play, she would return a 7 cost option card from your trash to your hand, and then would let you play a 7 cost option card from your hand without paying the cost. Beelstarmon established itself quickly to be a super unique take on the purple gimmick of using the trash as an additional resource. Using simple packages like Eismon to churn through cards quickly, she made a name for herself as a powerful control toolbox, able to run a wide range of 7 cost option cards that could handle different situations. She released with signature attacks for herself and her Musketeer cohorts, each of course costing 7 memory and having worthwhile effects of their own. And who should find themselves a home amongst these powerhouses? The little engine that couldn't, Howling Crusher. While still relegated to a one-of in most lists, by this point in the game, inheritables were beginning to have a bigger impact on the game as a whole. This fact only grew with time, as numerous decks began receiving all sorts of protections that could be accessed from their lower levels. Beelstar, being able to clean sweep these sources away on a whim, to this day continues to help carve out a niche for her as a reasonable rogue strategy, as more 7 cost option cards join the pool, with Beelstar ready to scoop them up and shoot them back out. While the idea of Howling Crusher being playable may have been a joke of the past, you'll still find this oddity lurking in the lists of Beelstar players even into the modern day. The number 6 spot goes to Vedramon from BT1. Vedramon is 6 to play, 6,000 DP, and 3 to Digivolve. When attacking once per turn, if you have a Tamer in play, you can unsuspend this Digimon. And, as an inheritable, during all turns, as long as you have a blue Tamer in play, you get plus 1,000 DP. Vedramon was one of the 2 secret rares released in the first set of the game, and bizarrely, neither of them really saw any play. Vedramon had a lot of things working against it, but the biggest drawback was its expensive 3-cost evolution on a level 4 body. We've already discussed how important memory-efficient evolution was in the early days of the game, and Vedramon simply did not fit this mold. The ability to unsuspend on attack is actually pretty powerful, and generally is a huge boon for the cards it gets printed on, but not Vedramon. At least not yet. The chances of swinging into security safely with a 6,000 DP body were honestly pretty slim, and for the time there were only a small handful of potentially useful buffs in blue. This meant that if you really planned to swing into security, there was a good chance you weren't going to survive to benefit from the unsuspend in the first place. This fact didn't change, even as Vedramon and his mega-level All-Force Vedramon began receiving bits of support over various sets. Almost immediately, this secret rare would be usurped by a new Vedramon in BT2, one which carried the vitally important jamming ability to allow for safer checks into security, and a cheaper Evo cost of only 2. There was even a promo released called Vedramon Zero, which could at least buff itself to 7,000, giving it another leg up over the original secret rare. As All Force became a viable rogue strategy years down the line in BT11, the secret rare from BT1 continued to collect dust. It wasn't until the release of BT14 that this wayward binder chow would awaken from its slumber and receive some deserved attention. BT14 brought with it what some would consider the most powerful egg in the game, Bulkman. As long as your opponent didn't control a Digimon with as many or more sources than your stack, your Digimon had jamming. The way this egg was worded meant that even if your opponent had no Digimon in play at all, your condition was met and you would swing into security scot-free. This was the break Vron had been waiting for, finally receiving access to the jamming inheritable it had always wanted. Now granted, the 3-cost evolution still very much did hold this card back, though it didn't stop it from seeing some experimental play in many blue decks that wanted to abuse this powerful new Digi-Egg. However, this hype would not be forever, with Bandai announcing this new tool would be limited to 1 in the coming formats. But at least it gave this swaggy dinosaur a chance to experience the limelight, if not briefly. Breaking into the top 5, we actually have the other secret rare from BT1, Metal Greymon. Metal Greymon is 8 to play, 3 to Digivolve, and has 9,000 DP. It carries an incredibly aggressive security attack +2, along with the trade-off of losing 5 memory anytime it attacks, with an inheritable boasting an impressive +3,000 DP boost on your turn. This card is the literal definition of extra, depicting the trope of a berserk monster bearing overwhelming power but being unable to properly control it. It actually has quite a few records going for it, especially in the early days of the game. Metal Greymon is one of only 3 cards in the game at the time of this video with a printed value of security attack +2, 4 if you count Bancho Stingmon. It also has one of the most detrimental effects ever printed, losing an astonishing 5 memory with each attack, which, let's be honest, is a big reason why this card has never really seen a whole lot of play over the course of its lifetime. While it did bring a massive DP buff, still to date the biggest printed inheritable buff in the game, matched only by a small handful of niche cards, and being the only one among them to be completely generic, in general, the flexibility of being able to attack at the level 5 stage without it having to be a planned vacation highly discouraged Metal Greymon's use. With that being said, Metal Greymon did eventually find itself a permanent home, where it still sees play to this day, in a rogue strategy housing one of the most passionate and absolutely not biased fan bases of the entire game, Machinedramon. Introduced in EX1, Machinedramon and the strategy that formed around it seek to make use of the wide range of level 5 black and red cyborg Digimon, able to add these level 5s from trash or hand into the sources to create a Megazord of sorts that can be incredibly tedious to remove from the field. Metal Greymon, as mentioned, has the best generic buff available in the game, so the fact that it existed on a level 5 red cyborg body meant it was a no-brainer to include in virtually every deck list the strategy has seen since its inception. Even as new sets have rolled out and evolved the machine strategy in various ways, Metal Greymon has endured for his ability to provide an unconditional and unmatched power boost to the Metal Menace. The number 4 spot on today's list goes to Bulkman from BT6. Bulkman is 5 to play, 2 to Digivolve, and has 5,000 DP. As long as you have 3 or more security cards, he has security attack +1. I could basically copy and paste most of the entry for Vron into this slot and still have it apply. Bulkman released in BT6 alongside powerhouse Digimon like the Bond cards, and honestly, for a level 4, had a lot going for him. Having the desired average stats of 525 made him clean and efficient, and having an extra check was obviously pretty welcome. However, as mentioned, he faced many similar problems to earlier entries on the list. To his credit, Bulkman actually did release with access to the ever-coveted jamming inheritable through his rookie form, Pulsemon. However, in order to achieve the desired effect, you needed to have exactly 3 security cards. Now, Pulsemon did bring with it an on-play that allowed you to trash security until you had the desired 3, and even refunded his play cost for each card that you got rid of. But then at some point you have to stop and realize that now you just trashed 2 of your own security cards just to try and get an extra check on your level 4. Needless to say, this wasn't exactly a desirable play pattern, and relegated Bulkman to, at best, niche experimentation. Much like Vron, however, his luck would change with the introduction of a new Digi-Egg, released in BT13, Gurruman. Anytime a card was removed from your security stack, you could give one of your Digimon jamming. Now granted, this still didn't help the issue of needing to inflict damage on yourself to make use of the jamming inherit, but this was one piece of the puzzle to solving Bulkman's usage. One set further and we were introduced to an entire new yellow archetype called Yellow Vaccine. This deck was stuffed with cards that influenced and utilized your security stack as an extra resource, adding cards to hand or even digivolving from it while immediately replacing the cards to make sure your stack wasn't dropping. The combination of this new strategy and the splendid egg brought about in BT13 gave Bulkman a very real niche, especially since it was also graced with the vaccine trait, helping it meld seamlessly into the list. BT14 Patamon could push out of the raising area, immediately digivolve into any Digimon with the vaccine trait from your security stack, which could easily be set up by BT14 TK. Should you find a Bulkman, not only would you have removed a card and triggered Kiaramon's jamming, but you get to immediately replace the card and potentially gain 2 memory from Patamon and TK, right before swinging for 2 nearly free security checks. Bulkman has been a card with solid potential ever since its release, and it's been an honest joy getting to see this guy finally find a home that can maximize his power. As we move into the top 3, we have Promo Where Gurruman. Where Gurruman is 7 to play, 3 to digivolve, and has 6000 DP. When attacking once per turn, you can unsuspend this Digimon, a simple but powerful effect. And as an inheritable, during your turn, if you have 8 or more cards in hand, this Digimon gains security attack +1. Many of the same principles apply as Bulkman and Vron, but the rise to stardom for Where Gurruman was meteoric by comparison. Both of these effects are highly aggressive, but at the time of its release, Where Gurruman really wasn't poised to take full advantage of them. Released alongside it was a promo Gurruman with an inheritable effect made to synergize strongly with its evolved form. On attack without a once per turn restriction, as long as this Digimon had Gurruman in its name, you could draw a card. The big problem wasn't accessing or even enabling these abilities, the problem was how weak Where Gurruman was on his own. Having an unsuspend effect is still one of the best things an aggressive Digimon can have. The problem though is you need to actually survive the first swing in order to make use of the second one. 6000 DP is low for a level 5 Digimon, even in the earliest days of the game. While certainly not a guarantee that you would check something big enough to beat Where Gurruman in battle, it definitely wasn't a low enough chance to risk losing your stack either. Without access to jamming and lacking in meaningful DP buffs, Where Gurruman was a big gamble if you wanted to swing into security with it. While the inheritable was still powerful in its own right, it wouldn't be stretching to say that this card really had a lot of untapped potential, but lacked the tools to properly access it. With the advent of BT9 and the implementation of the heavily X-antibody dominant format, it surprised no one, of course, that the partner Digimon of one of the 2 primary protagonists from the original show received a full line of X-antibody support, and what powerful support it was. The key card that unlocked the archetype's terrifying OTK potential was Gurruman X Antibody. As an inheritable, if this Digimon would be deleted in battle, you can detach 2 same level Digimon in order to prevent the deletion. It's honestly pretty crazy just how well this one card tied the archetype together with the aforementioned support already in the pool. By stacking an X Antibody rookie alongside Gurruman X, you could create a pretty resilient stack, capable of generating not only tons of aggression, but card advantage thanks to the promo Gurruman with each swing. With battle protection, Where Gurruman could now swing almost completely free of worry. While still soft checking security removal options, you could get an almost free check with Where Gurruman, immediately unsuspend, instantly swing again. Next, you'd go into Where Gurruman X, get another unsuspend, and potentially 2 checks thanks to Where Gurruman's inheritable, backed up by 2 draws from Gurruman. Combine this with Metal Gurruman X having another unsuspend and potential to end the game immediately with Blitz Omnimon, and you were left with a shockingly fast OTK deck that cemented itself as a dominant Tier 1 deck for numerous formats. Eventually, promo Where Gurruman found itself getting limited to a single copy per deck, finally bringing an end to the Melga Rampage until more support was released several sets later. But it's still cool seeing how something as simple as a single layer of battle protection could transform this card from hardly worth considering to a bannable offense. And speaking of bannable offenses, number 2 on the list goes to Blossomon from BT3. Blossomon is 7 to play, 3 to digivolve, and has 7000 DP. It has the benefit of possessing one of the most mechanically broken keywords in the game thus far, Digizorption. When you would digivolve into a card with Digizorption in your hand, you can suspend a Digimon you already have in play to reduce the cost by the specified number. In Blossomon's case, 3, making the Digivolution completely free of cost. Now, right away, I'm sure people are typing up comments about how Blossomon was always powerful, and yes, he was, but hear me out. The first 3 sets of the Digimon TCG were a bit messy on release. While Blossomon was released in Set 3 in Japan, in the US it was part of Set 1.5, a weird amalgamation of cards from Sets 1 through 3. Now this is important because while there may have been a release delay in Japan, in the US, Blossomon released alongside a set of BT2 cards that created a deck which was not only powerful, but shockingly fast for its time. The headliner of this deck was Ceresmon, a powerful control card which would let you suspend opposing Digimon instead of your own when activating Digisorption abilities. The headliner in the level 5 slot actually wasn't Blossomon, it was the secondary Digisorption body, Ultimate level Argomon. Argomon had worse stats by most accounts, being 8 to play and only carrying 6000 DP, but as a Digisorption Digimon, neither of those factors really mattered, since it was just a free stepping stone to reach your level 6s with. What did matter was the powerful Inheritable. When attacking, you could play out a level 3 Digimon from your hand suspended without paying the cost. This let the appropriately named Queen of Green flood the field with bodies by suspending and attacking into opposing Digimon your opponent was establishing. To be honest, in those early days, Blossomon was basically just the awkward little brother that Mom made Argomon take with him anytime he went out with his friends. Blossomon was still a solid card in his own right, but he was for all intents and purposes strictly inferior to Argomon without that powerful Inheritable. Argomon would eventually find himself lying a bit too close to the sun, being among the first cards in the game to be limited to a single copy, alongside the horrendously broken option card, Hidden Potential Discovered. After these hits, Green as a whole heavily faded out of the meta. A few strategies existed in the coming sets, but outside of the generically powerful Digisorption, Blossomon was just kind of a leaf, or I guess a flower in the wind, drifting without a home. Beginning in BT8, we did start to see the first signs of a new Green strategy that aimed to flood the board with bodies that benefited from suspending down its own field, helmed by the new mega, Shivamon. While the strategy wasn't fully flushed out yet, a few more sets in, and BT10 brought a powerful card, which would become the centerpiece for one of the longest standing Green decks in the game's history, Bloomlordmon. Bloomlord continued the same general strategic themes as Shivamon, but helped focus the strategy in a way that, funnily, actually pushed Shivamon out of his own archetype. BT10 and EX3 brought tutors and support cards that named 3 specific Digimon types: Plant, Vegetation, and Fairy. While this specificity may have pushed the insectoid Shivamon out, it coincidentally brought back Blossomon in a big way. Also released in BT10 was Cherrymon, the first card in ages to hold the Digisorption ability, but Bandai had clearly learned from their mistakes and made sure that even its reduced cost wasn't free. This meant that despite having shiny new competition, Blossomon finally held the competitive edge. In fact, Blossomon, or rather Free Digisorption, once again proved to be so powerful, Blossomon found himself on the Limit 1 list right alongside his older brother Argomon. It's funny in retrospective to think about how a card that was once considered the annoying secondary option that you really only ran because you had to, actually has continued to see play long after Argomon has left the minds of players, still seeing play to this day at 1 copy, all because it carries a specific Digimon type. Finally, at the top of the tier list, our number 1 spot goes to Gravity Crush from BT1. Gravity Crush is a red option card that costs 0. It gains you 2 memory, but at the end of the turn, loses you 2 memory, with no ability insecurity. Let's go back again to the first few sets of the game. The state of the game in the earliest metas was all about memory efficiency. Digimon without abilities saw tons of play simply by having efficient stats that let you climb the level ladder into your threats in a very blunted, but still dynamic way. As a result, cards like Hammer Spark and the aforementioned Hidden Potential Discovered were format staples, which allowed you to potentially make an extra move without passing turn, or choke your opponent more efficiently. But in Gravity Crush's case, there was a bit of a problem. Gaining 2 memory without any condition is frankly an incredible effect, one of the best at the time, but As soon as you pass the turn, you have to give that memory back. This sort of interaction was called memory borrowing, and Gravity Crush wasn't the only card to do this. A small cycle of level 5 Digimon carried a similar ability, able to gain 3 memory on attack, but giving up 3 memory at the end of the turn, and these didn't really see any play either. Since large memory swings could potentially spell disaster by letting your opponent make retaliatory plays, memory borrowing was a largely ignored mechanic outside of a few small strategies. Now granted, Gravity Crush did see little bits of experimentation here and there, but despite being released in BT1, it wouldn't actually be until BT10 that Gravity Crush would go from an occasional tech card to one of the scariest cards in the entire game, generally a signal that there would be no next turn. BT10 saw the introduction of a new ability called Digicross. This mechanic would let you hard play Digimon from your hand for a reduced cost by tucking specified cards from your hand or field into the sources. The flagship archetype that made use of this mechanic was Crossheart, an aggressive strategy that rotated around the newly released Shoutmon Cross 4. Shoutmon does a lot, but to quickly summarize, you could play him for 1, draw 2 cards, he would gain Rush from BT10 Shoutmon, then, at the end of attack, would delete himself to unsuspend his archetypal tamer, Mikey, to set up another Cross 4. This absurd play pattern created one of the first Tier 0 strategies the game had ever seen up until this point, having such insane speed and consistency that you either had to play Crossheart or play a deck that had a good matchup into it. Gravity Crush played into this strategy obscenely well. As it turns out, if your opponent doesn't get another turn, they don't actually get to use the 2 memory given to them. While other strategies had existed with OTK potential prior to Crossheart, it had a few key features going for it that let it make especially good use of the Rogue option card. Cross 4 being able to draw you 2 cards with each cycle meant the ability to dig through your deck quickly and see both copies of Crush and follow-up copies of Cross 4 itself. Combining this with the fact that you had multiple bodies that could be rushed into play for low memory cost meant that a copy or 2 of Gravity Crush could represent multiple additional attacks. Even in spite of a ban list hit to Shoutmon Cross 4, the strategy endured with a new massive threat in BT11, Mervamon, who was more than happy to make use of massive memory gains to push through game-ending rush attacks. Gravity Crush often saw play in these shells alongside its sister card, Blinding Ray. And while Blinding Ray could be considered for this spot alongside Gravity Crush, Ray had already been given a chance to shine in earlier formats thanks to decks like Yellow War Greymon and Lord Nightmon. To date, possibly the best deck to make use of the newly broken option card has to be Red Hybrid, which received some insane buffs to unify its strategy in BT12. And since 2 memory from Gravity Crush coincidentally equaled the 2 memory requirement of digivolving a hybrid onto a tamer, the match was made in heaven so that each copy of Gravity Crush was essentially a free attack your opponent really couldn't prepare for. Gravity Crush has managed to dodge the ban list as of the makings of this video, but with new OTK strategies coming in and out of meta relevance, some players would be happy to see this card gone. Gravity Crush is a prime example of card design that is far from future-proof. While the slower nature of the meta it was released into may not have provided a good home for it, as the game continues to pick up speed and memory efficiency becomes more and more cutthroat, Gravity Crush will continue to grow stronger and stronger. And it honestly wouldn't surprise me if one day this card finds itself on the ban list alongside some of the other members of this list. And that's going to do it for today's top 10. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss my next upload. Are there any late bloomers that I missed? Leave those down in the comments below, maybe we'll do a part 2. With that, I am an avid herpetologist. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I will see you all next time.